and that by the leadership of Muslim countries being in alliance with the West, they are somehow complicit in a betrayal of the fundamentals of their religion. And I think that that is a narrative that has a broader reach than we think, and I think it's a narrative that has to be challenged inside and outside Islam.
And how do you challenge it?
You challenge it primarily by actually empowering and supporting those within Islam who will stand up and say, and there are many of them, that is nonsense. Actually, Islam will sort out its own problems. In any event, it is, you know, it is a religion. It does not describe the politics of every nation. There are many different nations with many different problems. We can solve our own problems. And actually, the world that we want today is a world of peaceful coexistence where Islam embraces the 21st century.
But how far are you away in what you think today from Samuel Huntington's Clash of Civilizations?
I don't think there is a clash of civilizations, but I his the issue he raised is essentially the correct issue. I don't think the 21st century will be a century of political ideology. I think it will be a century of religious or cultural ideology with the potential to divide, and in that division cause conflict.
So what do you think of this narrative idea expressed by Mr. Blair?
I think that he is right on one dimension of the whole problem. I don't think that we are only talking about terrorism. We are talking about the narrative. What he's saying, when he's saying, you know,
saying that there's a narrative out there that says that within the Islamic world and beyond, yes, that the West is opposed to Islam.
This is a perception. We cannot deny the fact that the great majority, by the way, it's not only a minority, the great majority of the Muslims in Muslim majority countries and even in the West, they have the perception that there is something in the West which is against Islam. And so the narrative is there. And if you look at what happened, you know, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, also all these wars, and then also what is going on in Palestine, and then what is going on in the West. We were talking about what is happening in the States with, you know, this controversies around the community center burning the Quran, and then also in Europe, when you are building a mosque is problematic. In my own country, Switzerland, banning the minarets and then the headscarf. The perception is that there is a pressure on the Muslims, and the narrative is there. We should, and this is where I agree with him that there is this narrative. Now, how are we going to solve this? There is two things that I want to say. The first one, and I agree with him on that, and with many other Muslims, we should, Muslims, come back to the fundamentals and be critical. This critical engagement of Muslims, self-criticism, critical mind, this is something that I have been talking about it for the last 25 years. We need Muslims with deep faith and critical minds to be able to look at our own failures from within and to build, and not to be the victims, not to play the victim mentality, not to be the object of their history, but to be the subject of our own history.
Which you hope that Catholics will do, and Jews will do, and Buddhists will do, and everyone else. Right.
It's to be a human being, by the way. It's just to be a subject. But this is where I disagree with Tony Blair, is just to not acknowledge the fact that in his own policy, in the way he is dealing with the Muslim majority countries, there are problems. The West is not, you know, completely white in anything which has to do with the Muslim majority countries. We are in the West supporting dictatorships. We are in the West dealing with some Muslim scholars, very traditionalist, when they are protecting our geostrategic interest. We are happy. So I think that he also have to be not, you know, it's not nonsense. You cannot say it's nonsense. It's not a black and white picture, but there are things to be said. When, for example, George Bush said, these people who are doing what they are doing are against our values and our democracies, and this is the only reason he's giving. I think that they are wrong. We condemn what they are doing as Muslims, but it's not only this that they are blaming. They are blaming the United States of America and the European countries sometimes to be in contradiction with their own values. So it's not nonsense, and I think that I would like, as a European, I would like as a Western citizens, to be able to talk with my own governments to say, if you want to change this perception, you have to be more consistent with your own values. You cannot promote democracy within and just deal with dictatorships outside and tell
because you think it serves your geostrategic interests.
Exactly.
And when in fact the people who are there may very well perceive it as you are against us.
Exactly.
You know,
which is exactly it. It's
because you were
as
supporting, in our judgment, people who were oppressing us.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
yes.
What is the necessity of modernization and Islam?
It's a very important topic. You know, I have been working on that field for the last 20 years, working on how do we go for, you know, there is an Islamic Arabic concept called ijtihad. How do you reform? You have a critical reasoning interpretation on the text. You are not just reading the text literally, you are contextualizing them. And I reached a limit where I was, and this is why I wrote a book called Radical Reform, Islamic Ethics and Liberation. We need a liberation. Islam doesn't need reform, but the Muslim minds need to be reformed, our interpretations. So I would say that from within, the Muslims, the way they read the text, the way they contextualize the text, the way they deal with surrounding cultures, not to confuse being Muslim with being an Arab, not to Arabize Islam, not to culturalize our religion. We have principles, but the universality of these principles is that we can take for all the cultures and just be consistent with our values. And we have to work on many fields. And in the book, I'm talking about, you know, social issues, women, very important, sciences. In the past, we are so great with sciences, and it's as if now we have nothing to contribute with. I think it's just not acceptable from a very old tradition, very old civilization, not to be involved in anything which has to do with scientific discoveries and technologies. So we have to
Because it
reform.
puts a lock on your own potential.
Exactly. And I think that this is where, as Muslims, we have to work. And this is what I call this reform. You know, there are two ways to speak about reform. Adaptation reform, when you just adapt yourself to the current situation of the world, or transformational reform, to try to change this world for the better. And I think that every one of us, atheist, agnostic, Jew, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, if we are consistent with our values, we only know one thing that we have in common. We have to change this world for the better.
The quest for meaning, Tariq Ramadan, developing a philosophy of pluralism, and this also, What I Believe, from the author of Western Muslims and the Future of Islam at St. Anthony College at Oxford. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us.